Okay, so imagine for a second that you are this brilliant, completely untouchable federal judge.
Right, someone with an absolute ton of institutional power.
Exactly. You've spent your entire life building this immaculate, basically impenetrable fortress around your reputation. You are a monument to excellence, a pillar of the community, and you literally hold the power of life and death, or at least freedom and imprisonment, over thousands of people.
You're the ultimate guardian of the law.
Right. But now, imagine waking up at like 2 in the morning, looking at the man sleeping next to you, and deciding with just total clinical detachment that the only way to protect your pristine public image is to murder him.
Yeah, it completely shatters our standard understanding of how power and self-preservation operate.
It really does. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we're dissecting the anatomy of absolute control. We're looking at a source document titled The Unspoken Life Sentence Docs, which is this meticulously crafted narrative detailing the chilling descent of a brilliant legal mind into, well, a transnational criminal enterprise.
And our mission today is really to guide you through the psychological and, honestly, the logistical machinations of this central figure, Judge Diamond Andrews.
Yeah, we really want to explore what happens when that relentless pursuit of a perfect, immaculate facade collides with forces that are equally ruthless. Because have you ever wondered what the ultimate cost of perfection is?
It's a great question,
Mhm.
because for Diamond, maintaining a flawless public image isn't just about vanity, not at all.
Right, it's a survival mechanism, a high-stakes survival mechanism that leads to multiple engineered murders and a partnership with the mob. So, okay, let's unpack this puzzle, because it is a terrifying, fascinating look at human behavior.
It is. And to really understand the shocking events in this document, we have to look past the crimes themselves and examine the why. We need to look at the systemic pressures and the psychological architecture underlying Diamond's baseline.
Okay, so let's establish that baseline. Who is Diamond Andrews before all the chaos?
Well, the text establishes Judge Diamond Andrews as a 45-year-old, brilliant African-American judge. And she's navigating the overwhelmingly white, male-dominated corridors of judicial power in Texas.
Which, as the document points out, is no small feat.
Exactly. The text is very explicit that for her, the cost of entry into this world was astronomical. What's fascinating here is how the systemic demand for Black excellence morphs into this pathological need for control. Her perfectionism wasn't just a quirky personality trait.
No, it was a non-negotiable requirement. She couldn't afford the missteps or, the public outbursts or the messy personal lives that her male colleagues might just brush off as being eccentric.
Right. The narrative actually describes her composure as literal armor. I mean, she meticulously clips away any regional warmth from her accent, she abandons ties to her old neighborhood, and she maintains this almost monastic social life.
And the source material uses this really brilliant phrase. It calls her perfectionist edifice high-interest collateral.
Yes, she's posting this collateral against a system that is essentially just waiting for a reason to find her lacking. Any perceived flaw isn't just a personal failure. It's a professional and racial liability that could dismantle decades of grueling work.
And her brilliance is her shield, but she needs a thick shield because she's hiding a pretty massive secret, right?
She is. Her estranged father, Silas Thorne, is deeply tied to criminal influence and illicit financial power.
That is a huge shadow to be fighting against.
It is. She lives in absolute terror of the perception that her brilliance is just a front, or that she only got where she is because of her father's criminal ties. She has to be totally unimpeachable to prove she belongs there on her own merit.
So this exhausting battle for professional invulnerability teaches her a really dark lesson. Basically, every variable in life, especially human ones, has to be ruthlessly managed.
Precisely. She cannot afford a single unpredictable element. And this mindset just bleeds directly into her private life. For someone like Diamond, a divorce isn't a legal process, it's a PR disaster.
Right. Murder is basically treated as a clinical correction. Which brings us to husband number one, Jason Hall.
Yes, Jason. He's a highly successful corporate lawyer.
Yeah.
And their initial meeting reads like something straight out of a sleek legal thriller.
Oh, totally. They meet in the hallowed marble corridors of the Dallas County Courthouse. She's an ice-cool paralegal at the time, and he's this rising litigator. She nearly drops a heavy case file, and he catches her elbow to steady her.
And the text specifically notes his eyes were the color of fine scotch.
So cinematic. It's presented as this union of power elite purists. Their courtship is heavily curated, restricted to symphony box seats and members-only clubs.
Because Diamond sees Jason not really as a romantic partner, but as a mirror reflecting her own flawless life.
Hmm.
But Jason has layers she refuses to acknowledge. He has this secret life dealing obscure Renaissance triptychs.
Which introduces dealing with unpredictable, eccentric art dealers. It's a messy vulnerability. And Diamond just completely dismisses this side of him. She refuses to integrate his actual personality into her equation.
But the true catalyst, the fatal flaw that pushes her over the edge, isn't actually the art dealing. It's entirely physical.
It's a sound.
Yes. The teeth grinding in his sleep. The gnash, gnash, gnash in the middle of the night.
It's such a visceral detail. I love how the text uses it. It becomes this metronome of her rising dissatisfaction. But, okay, let me push back a little here. Is the teeth grinding really about the noise? Or is it her terror that she's married a human being with a subconscious she fundamentally cannot micromanage?
Oh, it is entirely about the uncontrollable subconscious. To Diamond, the powerful man who can't govern a primal, involuntary function while he sleeps, that demonstrates a structural weakness.
Yeah.
It proves he has an internal life she can't dictate.
It's like treating a marriage the way a tyrannical editor treats a manuscript. Instead of seeing a messy paragraph and trying to revise it, she just deletes the whole page.
That's a perfect analogy. Because divorce is off the table, she decides to initiate what she calls a correction. She meticulously plans a medical murder, treating homicide exactly the same way she would treat a complex legal brief.
And the mechanism she uses is chillingly calculated. She doesn't go out and buy poison. She uses his own medicine cabinet.
Right, she studies his medical history. She notes he's on a low-dose beta blocker for heart maintenance.
So she waits for a night when the grinding finally stops, which means he's slipped into deep REM sleep. Then she crushes a massive dose of his beta blocker into a powder and mixes it with a heavy dose of a central nervous system depressing antihistamine.
The pharmacology of why this works is fascinating, actually. Beta blockers artificially put the brakes on your heart rate. And first-generation antihistamines cross the blood-brain barrier and act as powerful depressants.
So you combine a massive dose of the drug telling the heart to slow down with a massive dose of a drug putting the brain to sleep, and
Your brain basically forgets to tell the heart to keep pumping. It mimics a massive heart attack. It induces profound bradycardia followed by cardiogenic shock.
wow. And to a local medical examiner, dealing with a backlog of bodies, looking at a guy with a known cardiac history,
It just looks like a tired heart that gave out in his sleep. They aren't going to order a highly expensive, specialized toxicology screen for common household antihistamines unless they suspect foul play.
and they would never suspect foul play because of the incredibly sinister way she delivered it. She dissolves this lethal powder into a glass of water she had consistently insisted he keep by the bed for middle-of-the-night thirst.
It's a prop. She weaponized the visual of a caring wife.
It's so dark. The outcome secures her a life insurance policy, but more importantly, it secures her reputation. No messy divorce, no rumors. She achieves the tragic, unassailable status of a grieving widow.
Exactly. The medical examiner isn't going to question a powerful judge standing there in a black veil.
So having successfully corrected her first husband with absolute ease, Diamond kind of seeks an escape from that suffocating widow persona, and that leads her straight into a very different kind of chaos.
Yes. 2 years after Jason's death, we see a stark deviation from her baseline. She spontaneously dismisses her driver and walks into this dive bar called the Anvil.
Such a great contrast. The text says it smells like stale hops and aged leather. She walks in wearing a sleek black gown, totally out of place, and orders a neat bourbon, which was Jason's drink, right?
Yes, a drink she had never consumed before. It's a quiet, internal rebellion against her own rigid rules.
And sitting 2 seats away is Louis Green, an architect. He's vigorously sketching on a cocktail napkin with a charcoal pencil, completely ignoring her status.
He's drawing a gargoyle, actually, trying to capture the visual inconsistency of the bar's brutalist light fixture. And when she accidentally bumps her ice bucket and spills ice on his arm, he doesn't scramble to apologize or show deference.
Right, he makes a self-deprecating joke about his gargoyle getting a melting halo, and he offers his hand, and his thumb leaves a noticeable smudge of charcoal on her pristine skin.
A mark she actively chooses not to wipe away. It's a visceral, tactile connection that shatters her sterile routine. Louis represents vibrancy.
Yeah, he engages directly with her mind, so they marry, and initially it's framed as a perfect joint venture. He's a renowned architect, she's a rising star judge. It's this magnificent structure of combined ambitions.
But a marriage cannot survive purely on architectural ambition. The foundation cracks when Louis' prize-winning firm begins to hemorrhage money.
He starts losing control of his professional life, and his coping mechanism becomes alcohol. The text describes this descent brutally. It escalates from a few evening scotches into a frantic nightly ritual.
He becomes pale, his hands shake. He comes to Diamond completely vulnerable, confessing that he is losing his firm and losing his grip on his life.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because when a partner comes to you terrified and vulnerable, the standard human instinct is to offer comfort. But Diamond's instinct is forensic.
With terrifying calmness, she tells him he doesn't need sympathy, he needs a hostile takeover. She advises him to liquidate assets, fire his loyal staff, and her exact words are, "Solve the problem, not feel it."
She meets his desperate emotional plea with administrative utility. It's like a building inspector, finding a crack in a foundation and deciding to just implode the whole building rather than patch it.
That's a very apt way to look at it. She profoundly rejects his humanity.
But wait, let me ask you this. Yes, Louis was responsible for his own addiction, but did Diamond's chilling lack of empathy actively accelerate his destruction?
Oh, her demand for a flawless exterior absolutely exacerbated his internal feelings of failure. And when she realizes her clinical advice won't fix him, that the variable of his addiction is beyond her control, her mindset shifts again.
She decides to use his addiction as her instrument of liberation. But the dynamic changes because the psychological warfare bleeds into horrific physical abuse.
Yes, Louis starts lashing out, first with insults, trying to chip away at her self-worth, and then it escalates to pushing, shoving, and closed fists.
Which creates an incredibly dark paradox. She's a respected, feared judge presiding over violent men, yet she arrives at her own chambers with black eyes. She has to meticulously cover up with heavy theatrical makeup.
It reveals the absolute limits of her societal power. She's the law, but she cannot seek justice for herself without shattering the immaculate facade she sacrificed everything to build. If she calls the police, she becomes a tabloid headline.
The system that demands her perfection would just devour her, so she resorts to her own form of justice. But notice the shift in her methodology here.
Right, the first murder was medical and internal. The second is environmental and violent. She orchestrates a fatal car crash.
She waits for a night when the tension is palpable. She watches him drink 5 double shots of liquor. She casually suggests they take a late-night drive to clear his head.
Knowing full well his pride won't allow him to refuse a challenge, and he'll insist on taking the wheel of his luxury sedan.
And she intentionally directs him toward a deserted, winding stretch of highway outside the city limits late at night. The isolation guarantees no witnesses and a delayed emergency response.
As he accelerates, heavily intoxicated, she waits for the precise, optimal moment of distraction before intervening. The resulting collision is designed to be absolute. A high-speed impact wrapping the sedan around an ancient oak tree.
The physics of a crash like that just obliterate any subtle evidence of foul play. The kinetic energy destroys the cabin.
And to the highway patrol and crash reconstruction experts, looking at the telemetry data and his massive blood alcohol content, it's an irrefutable, tragic case of a DUI.
So the outcome is, once again, immaculate exoneration. She emerges from the wreckage as the grieving, sympathetic, 2-time widow who survived a horrific tragedy.
Diamond truly believes she has perfected the art of the lethal exit. But this arrogance blinds her. She assumes she's the only one capable of treating human beings like variables to be manipulated.
She never stopped to consider what happens when someone applies her exact same forensic methodology to her, which brings us to the ultimate counterplay.
Yes, the predator becomes the prey. We explore how Diamond is completely outmaneuvered by someone using her own weaponized patience against her.
Let's talk about the meeting at the Daily Grind. Diamond is standing in line at this artisanal coffee shop, and she orchestrates what she thinks is a perfectly timed accident. She purposely bumps into a man, spilling her scalding caramel latte straight down his crisp white dress shirt at exactly 8 a.m.
She believes she's the one hunting. She targeted this man, Mark, because of his tragically vulnerable situation. Mark's wife, Eleanor, is suffering from advanced frontotemporal dementia.
And Diamond uses her past background as a certified palliative caregiver to just infiltrate his life. She becomes his indispensable consultant. And then she decides to liberate Eleanor.
Right. She uses her medical knowledge to synthesize a specific chemical compound, and she begins slipping it into Eleanor's evening tea.
Wait, can you explain the mechanics of what that compound actually does?
Well, frontotemporal dementia causes progressive degeneration of the brain. Diamond synthesizes a compound that subtly mimics and artificially accelerates the natural buildup of toxic proteins. It perfectly replicates the final fatal stages of the disease.
Oh, wow. So Mark thinks his wife simply succumbed to her illness. He thinks it's the merciful hand of fate, totally unaware that the sympathetic woman next to him engineered it.
But here's the monumental twist. Mark wasn't a random target. Mark is Jason Hall's brother, her first husband's brother.
That is just my jaw dropped when I read that in the source document.
It's incredible. And that 8 a.m. coffee spill, it wasn't Diamond's calculated move, it was Mark's. He had stalked her for 6 agonizing weeks.
He mapped her schedule, logged 11 successful undetected sightings. He knew exactly where she would be standing and orchestrated the spill to give her the illusion of control.
He had spent months dissecting Jason's digital footprint after his sudden death. And remember, Jason's secret passion for obscure Renaissance triptychs. Mark dug into that and uncovered a sophisticated money laundering operation.
Right, because transnational crime syndicates like the one run by Diamond's father, Silas Thorne, they need to clean massive amounts of dirty cash.
So they buy an obscure triptych with illicit funds through a shell company, have a corrupt appraiser artificially inflate the value, and when they sell it or donate it, the money re-enters the banking system completely clean.
Jason had discovered this and threatened to expose Thorne, so Thorne hired his own daughter, Diamond, to neutralize the threat.
But Mark figured out the timeline first. He weaponized his grief. So they marry. It's a whirlwind romance built on a terrifying foundation of hidden agendas.
And then history repeats itself. Diamond wakes up just after midnight and she hears it. The clack, clack, clack. Mark grinds his teeth in his sleep, just like Jason did.
The Diamond, this is a mocking crack in her newly constructed facade. She immediately decides she must initiate another correction.
She slips out of bed, goes to her closet, lifts a loose floorboard, and retrieves a hidden lockbox with her lethal compounds. But when she walks into the kitchen, the equilibrium of her life completely shifts.
Mark is sitting wide awake at the pristine white marble kitchen island, and spread meticulously across the cool stone are 3 manila folders.
Filled with private autopsy reports of the people she has corrected. Private toxicology results printed on thick forensic lab paper, highlighting the presence of her signature compounds.
The beta blockers, the antihistamines, the synthesized dementia analogs, and sitting right in the center is a small, high-fidelity digital voice recorder with a blinking red light.
Mark reveals his motivation. He says, "You were never the love of my life, Diamond. You were a debt collector, and now the debt is settled." He intends to hold her on a leash.
But Diamond's reaction highlights why she's such a formidable force. She doesn't panic. She calmly sits down and initiates a devastating legal counterplay. She exploits the concept of the fruit of the poisonous tree.
Right, because Mark stole the evidence and had it tested privately by a rogue lab, he bypassed standard law enforcement procedures.
Exactly. The fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine dictates that any evidence obtained illegally or without proper chain of custody is fundamentally tainted and entirely inadmissible in court.
She weaponizes the very law Mark tried to use against her. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the law isn't about truth for Diamond, it's just an operating system to be hacked.
She tells him she's already filed a preemptive, sealed emergency motion. She says, "You have no weapon, the law is on my side."
It's like two assassins pointing guns at each other under the dinner table while calmly eating their soup. Neither can pull the trigger without guaranteeing their own destruction.
And this is where Mark does something that redefines their relationship. He calmly presses delete on the digital recorder. He erases his own recorded confrontation.
Wait, if Mark spent years planning this intricate revenge, why did he delete the file so easily? Was it really a defeat, or did he want this twisted, mutually assured destruction all along?
The text provides a profound insight here. He looks at her and says, "I am like you, more so than either of us ever cared to admit." He initiates their mutual life sentence. He traps her in a reality where they are intimately bound by their shared darkness.
Trapped in the stalemate, they have to channel their toxic, mutual hostage situation outward. They transform their domestic nightmare into a highly lucrative criminal synergy.
They become known as the Resolution. It's a dark adaptation of a folie à deux, a shared delusion or madness between two people. Their intimacy is built on complicity and the thrill of outsmarting the state.
They're like a twisted version of a tech startup, but instead of disrupting an industry, they're disrupting federal indictments, like with their first case, Casper Dominguez.
Yes, Mark's oldest friend, facing a massive federal indictment for corporate embezzlement. Mark utilizes his financial expertise to dissect Casper's offshore accounts, erasing the digital footprints.
Meanwhile, Diamond identifies procedural loopholes and minute jurisdictional blind spots that cause the prosecution's seemingly ironclad evidence to just evaporate.
And the dynamic inverts with their second case. Stacy Peters, a high-level operative for Diamond's father, facing a grand jury investigation.
Diamond takes the lead. She identifies the judge assigned to the grand jury, a man with a crippling gambling debt that only Silas Thorne's syndicate can discreetly settle.
And Mark bridges the financial gap, using incredibly sophisticated cryptocurrency divestments to cover the payoff. It's a highly complex market loss on paper that allows the corrupt judge's shell company to absorb the funds.
So Diamond went from being an isolated mastermind to absolutely needing Mark's financial alchemy. But the psychological warfare continues at home. Mark leaves a burner phone out in Diamond's study.
A device used exclusively for communicating with the embezzler, Casper. He props it right where she will see it.
Let me ask you, why do that? Isn't Mark playing with fire? Why risk poking the bear when they're already walking a tightrope?
Because by leaving the phone out, Mark is silently proving he has independent leverage. He's establishing parity. It says, we're mutually compromised. If I go down, you go down.
But the tension reaches a boiling point when an anonymous tip-off regarding the Dominguez payment leaks using the exact specific technical jargon Mark created.
This near miss forces them into their customized, soundproof vault hidden behind the library. It bonds them in a high-stakes fight for survival.
But their success makes them too visible. Which brings us to Salvatore the surgeon, Ricci. It's like thinking you're the apex predator because you're a great white shark, and then a kraken reaches up and grabs you.
The illusion of control is completely shattered. Ricci summons them to a velvet-lined box at the city's Grand Opera House. The crashy music from the second act masks their conversation.
He needs them to orchestrate a cover-up for his daughter, Isabella, who committed an aggravated DUI that left a young man permanently paralyzed.
And Ricci demands the paralyzed victim be psychologically and financially dismantled to the point where he will apologize to Isabella in open court.
Which is just pure evil. Diamond refuses at first, knowing this is a permanent enlistment, but Ricci reveals a high-res photo of the inside of their secret soundproof vault.
He owns them now. This raises an important question about the hierarchy of power. She escapes the rigid rules of the legal system only to fall into the absolute dictatorial servitude of the mob.
And she crosses a massive psychological threshold here. Ricci wants a tenacious investigative journalist, Charles Smith, eliminated.
Diamond retreats to her study, opens an encrypted channel, and types. The noise has become excessive, requires silencing.
With a few keystrokes, she's ordering executions. She also recruits Javier the Courier Reyes for physical, untraceable logistics.
But look at her lifestyle now. Custom jewelry, military-grade security. She's fundamentally stripped of her autonomy, but surrounded by wealth.
Is it possible she actually enjoys this gilded cage more than the lonely marble halls of the courthouse? I mean, she's wealthy beyond belief.
Perhaps, but Ricci's demands escalate. He wants to use her judicial power on the world stage. This triggers the London loop.
Right. Ricci forces Diamond to orchestrate a trap, luring a rival, the Lord of the Thames, to the U.S., and using her judicial ties to have him federally raided and extradited.
Diamond receives massive public acclaim as a fearless judge, but she knows it's a trap, making her a global target. The London syndicate retaliates with a three-phase kidnapping of Mark.
Phase 1. Mapping his ghost perimeter. His visits to antiquarian bookstores, his solitary nature runs, his isolated parking bay.
Phase 2. A digital Trojan placed in Mark's friends network, creating phantom fees to distract him on his phone, and identifying his vintage car key as a weakness.
The London syndicate treated capturing Mark the way a hacker treats a secure server. They didn't break down the firewall. They just found an outdated plug-in, his vintage car key, and walked right in.
Exactly. Diamond spent her life eliminating variables, but Mark's nostalgic preference for a physical key became the variable that brought down their empire.
Phase 3. They disable a camera, copy the key, sedate Mark, and extract him. Mark's disappearance plunges Diamond into a 72-hour auditory vacuum.
Her world of meticulous control collapses. Finally, the London remnants call her on an encrypted line. The digital static of the caller's voice is chilling. They want a life for information. They blame her for their boss's fall.
Let's be honest with ourselves. When Mark was taken, wasn't there a tiny part of Diamond that felt relieved? The leash was gone.
She briefly considers letting Mark die, but she realizes his absence is a structural collapse. He's the financial architect and the only soul who understands her darkness.
So we hit the climax, the final correction. Diamond decides to reclaim him. She arms herself with a hunting knife and a stun gun, ready for vigilante justice.
But as she reaches the heavy oak doors of her foyer, They are violently pushed open by Ricci and his heavily armed men.
This scene is agonizing. Diamond is reduced to a civilian. Ricci laughs at her weapons, especially when she pulls out a small pink canister of pepper spray.
It destroys the last illusion of her supremacy. Ricci casually reveals that the mob's silence was just operational security. His men had already violently extracted Mark from an industrial wasteland.
Back home, changing Mark's bandages at that same marble kitchen island, they share a twisted kiss. Mark asks why she didn't let him die.
And she replies, "No one kills you but me." It's the closest this couple can get to a wedding vow. It's the romanticization of their trauma.
But the next morning, Ricci arrives with the new mandate. It's like a corporate promotion where you get the corner office, but the door locks from the outside and you can never leave.
Mark will be the chief financial phantom, creating a global labyrinth of crypto streams. Diamond will be the legal shield, filing complex motions to block international federal audits.
They are now the captive co-architects of a massive global financial ghosting operation. Does Mark actually believe she saved him out of love, or does he know he's just the structural anchor she couldn't afford to lose?
It's likely a deeply blurred line for both of them at this point.
What a journey. From a judge desperately protecting a facade from a biased system using medical murder to avoid a PR disaster, to becoming the architect of a transnational criminal economy.
It's a terrifying trajectory of someone trying to eliminate human imperfection.
I want you to reflect on your own lives for a second. How much energy do you spend maintaining your own flawless facade? This story takes it to the absolute extreme, but the core fear, the fear of being exposed as imperfect, is deeply human.
Absolutely. The need for control is universal.
I'll leave you with this final, chilling idea to mull over. Diamond started all of this to avoid the public mess of a divorce and to retain absolute control over her life. But look where she ended up. It begs the question, when you spend your entire life building an inescapable cage for others, did you ever stop to realize you were locking yourself inside it with them?
A profound point to end on.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.